Sunday service on a roll. Sunday service on a roll. Sunday service on a roll.
So Trav, you brought up the shadow work, right?
Yes.
And I think that you are like a guru when we're talking about working with energies that can be perceived as evil, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about thought forms and how those things can manifest as maleficent energies. What is your perspective on that? Because I just had an experience to where I had a dream about like a fear of mine. And when I came out of my dream, I said, oh, okay, that's a fear. And I called it what it is. I said, that fear is simply a thought form, right? I went back to sleep and had a dream of what people would perceive as negative or low vibrational energies, like jumping out at me, or what people would call trying to attack me. And when I woke up, I said, oh, that's a thought form. That's something that I've created by way of my fear, right? Or that's something that I created some way, somehow, you know what I mean? And it just hit me, thought form. What is your experience with this, with dealing with thought forms that actually manifest in the astral realm as maleficent energies? And how do we get those energies to be transformed into do great work on our behalf?
That's an awesome question. How to get these energies transformed and to be able to do the great work that we're supposed to do. Is that what you said?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So that's really the biggest problem that most people face, right? And that echoes my last Instagram post where I put, the path is easy, the mind is hard. We get in our own way. We get in our own way by so many different ways. It's countless because every person is unique, right? So I mentioned earlier about me drawing comics and creating characters and building worlds. I said that for a reason. See, when you have all this abundant energy, right? The nature of God is creation. The nature of chaos is creation. There's two parts to the seat. We're taught to live in separation. We're taught to look at everything as separate. Everything is this versus that, good versus evil, demons versus angels. That's incorrect thinking, because as long as you're thinking in dualistic mode, you keep yourself in separation. These things are all a part of you, right? So when I mentioned about creating characters, it's our natural ability to create life. That's what we do every single day. Every thought is a creation. Every thought that you feed, every thought is a seed. And if you feed it energy and belief, it becomes a creation. So working with magic, you start to learn that if you feed emotion to certain ideas, certain concepts, certain entities, they have more power. If you get into a process of repetitive thinking and feeling, that energy builds up in the astral, in the etheric realm, in the energy around you. So say, for example, I was depressed for many years of my life. And that depression did begin to become its own thing. And the way that it manifests is if something happens to trigger that depressed feeling, now this voice begins to talk to me, right? That's that thought form, that's that entity. And if I'm about to do something, it kills any positive thought. Oh, you're not good enough. You're not good looking. You're not qualified, right? You're not this, you're not that. And what that would do is trigger memories of other times to prove that this voice is correct. And that would take you on a downward spiral of just feeding those emotions, getting more and more depressed. At first, it lasts for hours. Then later, it lasts for days, then weeks. Next thing you know, years of your life are spent depressed and sad because you build the energy of this entity. You're making it stronger. And this goes with all kinds of things, right? If you're addicted to sex, you're starting to build up this energy of this sexual thing, right? It's not like there's these crazy demons in hell and the devil's torturing you. What you focus on expands. So if there's energy that you repetitively build, it creates life. Now, the way to heal yourself with that, it's not what you think, right? I mentioned about duality versus being at one with things. We think that we have to battle these things, we have to fight these things. But the thing with shadow work is you're doing the unexpected. You're doing the least thing that you would expect. You're having to absorb these things back into yourself, right? Everyone does it differently. But I know for me, around 2008, I was in the Navy and I was an alcoholic, drinking a lot. And that voice that I mentioned, the depressed voice, it became its own entity. So naturally, as a creative person, I love to draw and create. What I did for myself, I didn't know this was the greatest thing to do, but I made this depression an entity. I gave it a name. And when it would talk to me, I would visualize it as a creature. So what I was doing unknowingly was I was limiting its power by giving it a form, right? Eventually, what I began to do, because I began to see this thing as separate as me, I would begin to battle it. I'd begin to fight back. I'd begin to say positive things in my life to combat the negative things. And it got to the point where I began to see this thing for what it was. It was old, sad memories of my hurt child, my hurt self. And what I had to do was go in and reintegrate that with me. I had to tell myself, you know what? You're perfectly fine the way you are. You don't have to be trapped in the judgments of other people. You don't have to be trapped in the opinions of other people. I accepted myself. And that negative entity began to dissolve and become a part of me again. So that's what we have to do with these things that hurt us. We have to go back into that space. We have to heal the wounded child, the wounded heart. That's that heart chakra work you talked about. We have to go within and bring it back into ourselves. I know it sounds cheesy and corny to some people, but everybody is dealing with this in some way, shape.
That's real shit. That's real shit. So we're talking about alchemy. That's a form of alchemy to be able to do that, because you have to transform your thoughts and beliefs about that thing.
Yes.
That's alchemy. That's the work. So instead of now hating this thing, you love this thing. You give this thing a positive connotation.
Right.
You give this thing a positive belief. Now it can't do you the harm that you thought that it could, because it's being fed off a whole different energy.
Exactly. And that's an energy that it's not used to feeding on. So you're actually starving it. The old Native American tale about the two wolves, right? So every man has a negative wolf and a positive wolf. And depending on which one you feed, it gets bigger, stronger, and healthier. It overpowers the other wolf. So we really have to choose wisely about our perspective and our internal conversation. I believe that the internal conversation is the cornerstone for having success with your spiritual work. Not the rocks and gems, not the candles, not something you bought from some other YouTuber. It's that thought process. Take care of this, everything else is a downhill climb.